We are tan, we are rested, and F1 Brake Check is back in action. As that long good night known as the F1 offseason rolls on, Corey and I are back to lift your spirits and feed your thirst for news and rumors during the long winter break. Also, in this episode, we'll talk about why we love F1. So buckle up and get ready. F1 Brake Check is go, go, go.
Welcome. You are listening to F1 Brake Check, the epic podcast for all things Formula One, where we discuss technology, history, news, and perspective. With your hosts, Scott Vick and Corey Broom.
All right, we're back with F1 Brake Check. With me, as always, is my intrepid co-host, Corey Broom. Corey, how you doing today, sir?
Man, finally, we were talking about this right before we started the podcast, but finally, I'd say 80%, maybe 85% now of finished with flu type A. It sucked.
I've heard that it is quite nasty.
It's funny because I've been sick a bunch of times and I've had flu a few times, and yeah, it usually sucks, but this is a time that I was actually physically in pain. I'd have a headache so bad that it would wake me up at night. It was a nightmare, man. But finally, I think this is week 2. I'm finally, I'd say, like I said, about 85% finished with it. So downing massive amounts of vitamin C as much as I can hold in. Friday, you and I are hanging out. We're going to go to Babe's Chicken, which is, for those that don't know, it is perhaps the greatest place on earth for fried chicken.
Yes, it is up there. There's some people that I know in Oklahoma will debate you on that because there's a place in Okarche that, having had both, I tend to agree with you that I think Babe's is better, but there's a lot of people that would disagree that the Okarche chicken is better.
Okay. We will have to try that out one day.
Yes, absolutely. I think so.
Oklahoma's not that far, man.
No, it's not. No, Okarche's only like maybe 3 hours away. So.
Nice. Yeah, we'll have to do that.
Yeah.
Take an OU game and we'll head up there a little early or late.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, dude.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into the news and rumors and whatnot as we've progressed into the offseason. So first up, let's talk about the 2023 end of season test that the F1 teams did at Abu Dhabi right after the season's closing race. Not a ton came out of it. So the young drivers got a chance to finally drive this year's cars in anger at the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi directly following the end of season race. New McLaren driver Pato O'Ward actually wound up second on the time charts, which was pretty impressive for just having newly signed with McLaren as their reserve driver. So that was quite impressive, but not completely shocking. Pato O'Ward, for those of you who don't follow IndyCar, has been driving for McLaren for the last couple seasons in their IndyCar program. He's won a number of races, had a very good showing at the Indy 500 this last year. To be signed as their reserve driver is not really all that surprising, especially after all of the crap that has gone on with Alex Palou, who was supposed to move over to the McLaren team from Ganassi at the end of last season with the intention of becoming McLaren's reserve driver for Formula One. And then there was a big brouhaha. Ganassi sued McLaren, was saying that no, he was still under contract and everything. And so after all of that kerfuffle finally got settled out and Palou ends up staying with Ganassi, ends up winning the IndyCar championship, but Pato O'Ward stuck with McLaren, and for that he was rewarded with the reserve driver seat. Now, of the other runners, of course, a number of drivers sat out. Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen. You had a chance to see a number of other drivers really get to shine. Sergio Perez wound up 4th on the time charts. I believe at one point Russell had a pretty big shunt.
Took him out.
Yeah, exactly. His incident at turn 6 during the lunch break was caused by a component failure, and an investigation is being carried out. From what I understand, pretty rough outing for Russell during the postseason test.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
Now, personally, I don't know. I guess I can understand Max not participating. Reigning and now newly crowned world champion. I'm sure that he's probably got about 1 billion media appearances and requests and commitments and things like that for the media and everything else during this off season, that I'm sure that he probably wanted to skip out on this to at least have a day or two to relax before, all the other stuff started happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I would if I was in his position. I mean, 3rd-time world champion and such a decisive year that he had. I don't see risking it for one time as a test, especially. So
yeah,
get rested
absolutely.
up, get everything ready for next year, next season, and do all your media requirements.
Yep, absolutely. Because starting with after the awards banquet, which was just the other day, it's going to be pretty much nonstop for him for most of the off season.
Exactly.
He's not going to get to have as much time to spend sitting on a beach with his supermodel girlfriend like all the rest of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So let's move on. So let's talk about the latest kerfuffle surrounding Mercedes, and particularly around Toto Wolff and his wife, Susie. So I'm sure you're familiar with what went down and everything.
Somewhat, yeah. It seems to me, at least from what I've been seeing and reading, is it seems like the FIA is a little bit on the reaching side for this one. But what did say you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that they were reaching, but at the same time, I don't think it was really a true conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, so you've got Toto Wolff, who's the team principal for Mercedes, and you have his wife, Susie, who heads F1's women's only racing series. They're the F1 Academy. So she actually is considered an employee of F1 management, which owns Formula One, and she reports directly to the CEO. Of course, they're going to talk about things. Husband and wife, they see each other more or less on a daily basis. They're going to talk to each other about stuff.
You would hope so. Otherwise, they have a very unhealthy marriage.
I would agree. So, yes, and she might have made an offhanded remark that Toto may have repeated, but it wasn't true insider, and I'm using the air quotes here, insider information. It was probably just an offhanded remark, and then Toto probably said something in another meeting parroting her, and somebody from the FIA got all bent out of shape because it's somebody that was in that meeting that was part of Formula One management, then took and did an unsubstantiated report to the FIA. The FIA immediately starts jumping in on announcing that they're going to investigate them and everything, and then just as quickly back down.
Back early in my IT career, I made this one mistake. I blamed a group of people. Let's just call them the networking group. And I pointed fingers night and day at this one group because I knew for a fact this was a problem. As it turned out, it was mine. I just configured something on the server and it had nothing to do with them. And I learned very early on in my career, until you have all your facts, all your everything in a row, do not point fingers. And in this case, you're dragging two people's name through the mud that don't need to be there. Completely ridiculous and uncalled for by the FIA. Until you have proof and know what happened, don't say anything. Especially with these people, they're so high profile anyway, and you're going to drag them through the mud without knowing everything that happened. It's just, to me, it's stupid.
I totally agree. Like I said, I don't think that, even if she did pass information to Toto, I guarantee you it was not anything that was of a malicious or underhanded. It wasn't anything like that. It was maybe just, like I said, it was probably more just an offhand remark. It's just like husband and wives do. It's like if the husband or the wife is like a lawyer and she meets with a client. Well, in order to protect attorney-client privileges, she can't give out all the details, but I guarantee you when she comes home and the spouse asks, how was your day, dear? Exactly. They're going to say something and they're going to talk about it. They're probably going to tell about it in generalities. Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's all in generalities and things like that. Exactly. They're not going to go into super specific details or anything like that, and they do it with the assumption that the spouse is going to keep their mouth shut. They are not going to relay anything that they learn. Even the generalities are not going to be repeated outside of their A-B conversation. Occasionally, they might slip and make some like offhand comment or something, but they're not giving away trade secrets. They just make a comment, and then somebody takes that as, oh, they're passing information around. There's got to be something more, nefarious going on here. I'm like you. They jump to conclusions. Somebody leaked something to the media. It became a big, media story.
There. Yeah.
And everything. And it was much ado about nothing.
Exactly. And now Formula One has a little bit of egg on their face. They jumped the gun. They thought they had Toto and they thought they had his wife, and they didn't. It's just one of these things where you jump to a conclusion that you shouldn't jump to, especially with something like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on to Max's latest record that he broke.
Yes.
I'm not sure about this one. I'm excited. Let's hear it.
Okay. So in addition to all of the other records that Max broke this year, first driver to ever lead 1,000 laps. He was only the third driver in history to ever complete every single lap of every single race this season. Max, the highest number of points scored, highest number of wins, consecutive wins. He basically rewrote the record book this year. The season ends, and now for 2024, he's going to get to break another record, which is the amount of money he's going to have to pay to retain his super license.
Yeah.
He is going to have to pay 1.217 million euros, which I believe is like somewhere in the ballpark of like when you convert it, it's like somewhere around, 1.7, 1.8 million US dollars that he's going to have to pay to keep his super license for next year.
And that's all because of the amount of his winning.
Yes, exactly.
All attributed to that. So, if he would have stopped winning, he wouldn't have had to pay his. But then again, he wouldn't have been known in history as winning 19 races in a season, like you said, 1,000 laps leading in a season. So he wouldn't have had all those records. But I'm sure he's made that up and then some in all the sponsorships and.
Oh, but yes.
Easily.
For those of you who aren't aware, the way that the structure works for the Formula One super license, which is the license that all drivers have to have in order to be able to compete in Formula One. And you can't just pay to get a license. You have to have achieved certain parameters in lower racing categories in order to be able to get a super license. So the super license is actually based upon a point system, and you have to garner so many points in the lower classes in order to be able to get to I believe it's 40 points to receive a super license from the FIA. And those are things like winning a race in Formula 2, winning a championship. You get a number of points based upon how you finish in one of the lower formulas championship rankings. So it's like you get like 4 points, I think, if you finish first in F2. Don't quote me on these. A lot of this is coming from memory, which is not great right now. But once you achieve the super license, in order to keep the super license, you have to pay, it's 10,400 euros every year just to have the license. And then based upon how many points you scored in the previous season, adds an extra 2,100 euros for every point that you achieve. So with Max having scored 575 points, quick math, 1.2179, so 1,217,900 euros, which is an absolute record. I think last year he only had to pay, even in his championship winning season last year, he only had to pay 600 and something thousand. So he basically doubled the amount that he has to pay to have a super license next year, which is just nuts. I'm pretty sure that he's more than made up for it in sponsorships, bonuses for, winning races and things like that. And I would even be willing to bet even the team is probably eating part of that.
I would imagine so.
I guarantee you, we don't need to be holding a bake sale for Max so that he can,
no
participate
GoFundMe,
in
right?
Formula One next year. I'm sorry, what was that?
No GoFundMe.
Yeah, we don't have to start a GoFundMe. He's not going to be selling his memorabilia on eBay, his trophies and stuff on eBay or Etsy or anything like that.
Right.
So I think he's going to be okay.
So this next one I am super excited about.
What's
Max
that?
Fernando.
Yes. Absolutely.
Dude, if this happens.
So for those of you who don't know, Max Verstappen is looking at the possibility of putting together a drive for the 24 Hours of Le Mans next year. because Fernando Alonso, who has already won Le Mans twice, when asked if he would ever do Le Mans again, he said the only way I would be interested in doing it is if I had Max Verstappen as my co-driver. And Max Verstappen then, after finding out these comments, has actually come out publicly and in the press and said, if Fernando's game, I'm game. I love the 24 hours of Le
Oh,
Mans
so
anyway.
so do I. How do you not?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
how do you
exactly.
not and be into racing?
Yes, exactly.
Even if you're just into NASCAR, you still, I mean, that's almost a requirement. You have to love Le Mans. You have to.
Yes, exactly. You have to love everything about Le Mans. You have to, it's one of those classic, great, tracks. It has such a tremendously rich history. The number of drivers who have driven that race, the heroes and stuff. Some of them never raced in Formula One, but you have guys like Derek Bell, some of the great names that have been cemented in history because of the 24 hours of Le Mans. So the idea of Max and Fernando at Le Mans, you have to have 3 drivers on the team. And so the thought of Max and Fernando, I'm in it now already. I'm already in. I'm really excited that with those 2 A++ caliber names attached to a team, I don't care who you're going to get as a third driver. The amount of interest is going to be so, and just getting to watch this would be so
that's the thing.
freaking exciting. I'm just giddy.
This would be my dream team. Them 2, and maybe a Leclerc or a Norris.
Ooh.
Dude,
Ooh.
Right?
That would be very interesting.
Who would you say?
Well, no, I agree. That would be very interesting. Now, Leclerc, you would probably, because they haven't figured out which team they would run with. Because I mean, it's first of all, they're going to have a team that has the resources to probably to be able to run a third car, because most likely your major teams that are running hypercars in the hypercar series this year, you've got, Ferrari, Lamborghini, most of them already have established driver pairings. They're not going to be willing to bump their full-time drivers just to have Max and Fernando in their car up and down the pit lane in the hypercar series, because I guarantee that's probably the only way that Max and Fernando would be willing to do it, is they would want to be able to take and compete for the overall win. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is they would have to be in one of the hypercar spec cars. But you've got some very, very well-funded teams that are going to be participating now. Okay, so having said all of that, the only way that I could see Leclerc being the third driver in that group is if Ferrari fielded a third car, which could very well be, because I guarantee you, because of politics and everything, Leclerc would only be able to take and drive the Ferrari hypercar. Sure. He's definitely not going to be able to take and go jump in like the Toyota or, well, I don't know, maybe Toyota, maybe if, as long as it's not a manufacturer who is also involved in Formula One. That would actually be a very, very interesting notion, is to see Ferrari field a third car for Max. But then again, Fernando having been a Ferrari driver, I can see that. I wonder how Christian would feel about Max jumping into a Ferrari.
I mean, he's a superstar, so I mean,
yeah, that's true. But I could definitely,
I could see, some heartburn there. Sure.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see Fernando and like Norris and Max, which would, oh my God.
I know,
my head just exploded. And you see them jump in, like, say, the Porsche, which was super competitive last year in IMSA. They could be a real contender. Toyota could step up with a third car for the 3 of them. And especially with Toyota, you wouldn't see any kind of political wrangling or anything around that. So that could be super interesting. So, I mean, it's depending upon what car they wind up with and a really good third driver. I'm super excited about that notion.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
We were talking about Ferrari and possibly stepping up with a third car. That I forgot that Ferrari had actually already announced that they are going to be running a third car next year. But right now they only have one driver attached to that car.
Yeah.
That they could very easily have 2 other drivers that they could
slot
in theory bump and put Max and Fernando into it, along with the driver that's already been named, former Formula One driver Robert Kubica.
Wow.
So that could be a That would be a very, very interesting pairing. Moving on. One of the things that we're going to be doing during this off season is we're going to be, in addition to discussing the news and rumors that happen from week to week during the off season, Corey and I are also going to start exploring some other subjects that don't fit in, maybe not necessarily during the regular season. So one of the things that we're going to take and do during this off season is we're going to explore some of these subjects and discussions about some other subjects that may not necessarily fit into our discussions during the regular season. We're going to be talking about some of the rich history of Formula One. We're going to talk about some of the crazy things that have gone on away from the track, some of the great rivalries in Formula One. We're going to break down some of the Formula 101 type things. We're going to take and talk about things like safety cars versus the virtual safety car and advantages and disadvantages of them and things like that. So one of the things that we're going to take and talk about today in our first crack at this is why we love F1. And Corey, I'm going to go ahead and let you start off. Tell me kind of how you got into F1 and what has kept you around? What has kept you coming back for more?
Initially, I've always loved racing. Started out really loving drag racing. When you first watch a F1 race or you watch a drag race, you're thinking, oh, well, that's not that hard. You just press the gas down and go. But there's so much more to it than that. And for F1, initially, obviously, it was the speed. You had these cars going 300 kph or 200 miles per hour, or what have you. So much speed. And then they're going around these curves and taking all these Gs. That's what really first started me out in liking F1. It's just how technical these drivers are and what they could actually do with a car as far as speed goes. Because as we all know, driving around a track in a normal car, anybody can do that. To do that with speed, especially the amount of speed that these people carry, I completely admire the skill. And then getting into that even a little bit more is starting to understand the drivers, how they drive, what their perfect setup is, what that looks like. And then what's kept me around is, obviously the speed, but also more is the strategies behind it and understanding the technology in F1. So understanding about overtaking and when the best time is to overtake or undercutting or tire management, all these things combined into one race really keeps me around in F1 because I'm sure other series have something very similar to these type of strategies. But to me, the pinnacle of racing is F1. Everything else below it, but F1 is the pinnacle. To be an F1 driver, you are the best of the and truly the best of the best, right? Not like in Men in Black, the best of the best, sir. It truly is the best drivers, and they are the ones that can command, not only the salaries but be able to command these cars. Drivers like Sainz and Alonso to be able to, at speed, meaning like 150, 200 miles an hour, they're driving that fast, but they're also in the back of their mind saying, okay, well, I need to bring this other car up closer so he can have DRS, so the people behind him can't attack me. All these things playing in your mind or in the driver's mind is just beyond comprehension to me. That they are that well trained that not only are they driving these tracks this fast, but they're also in the back of their minds also having a strategy on track, as well as their engineers having a strategy as well. So those are some of the things that I really enjoy about F1. Just keeps my heart racing and really keeps me in F1.
When did you start getting into Formula One?
I think it was like a couple of years before Drive to Survive came out. I started watching it. To be fair, I wasn't like I am now, where I watch practices, I watch to qualify all the way through to race. Back then I was mostly just interested in the races, who's doing what, how fast they're going, all that, the stats behind it and everything like that. But then maybe a year or so after that, I really started getting into the practices, who's doing what the cars are looking like, possible strategies, and then really getting more into the technology. And then when Drive to Survive, the first couple of years, at least when it first came out, it gives you that perspective of what it's like to be on a team, because you get all the background information. You see what's happening to the drivers, what's happening to the team principals, the race engineers, all that. Now it's a little bit different because they're focusing more on the drama aspect of everything. But the first few years of Drive to Survive was just phenomenal because of that. It gave you a
Mhm.
bird's eye view of what you typically wouldn't see unless you were actually part of the team.
I was super excited when Netflix did the Drive to Survive series because that definitely gave an inside look at the way that F1 is run and the
Yeah.
personalities behind F1. And it gave people a kind of a behind the curtains view of the sport, which I think has brought in a tremendous number of new fans, which I think is fantastic. But now that you've got these new fans and you've got some of them that are become super passionate and they do start, and once they start watching the races and everything, before they even start watching the races, they already got have a kind of an insight into, oh, okay, well, that's Charles Leclerc, and they already know a
Right.
lot of the drivers' names and they know who they are before they ever even see them really quote turn a wheel in anger, in a race. Because I mean, yes, they do have race footage interlaced in
But it's
between
just footage.
interviews
Yeah.
and things like that
Right. It's just part
during the
clips here. Yeah.
yeah, but when they actually get to see a race in real time,
Mhm.
they already know who most of the drivers are already at that point. And so they already have kind of an insight into who's who and everything. And I think that that enhances their ability to watch the race. And so that keeps them interested in the race longer, which then takes and fuels the desire to learn more about the technology behind it, the rules
Exactly.
behind the sport. And then some of them start getting into other aspects of the sport and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yes, I totally agree that Drive to Survive has been a huge boon for Formula One.
Especially here in the States. Because, like we
Yes.
were saying earlier in the season, why is it that F1 isn't really taking hold like it does in Europe? And really, we can attribute a lot of the fanfare now in the US, at least, directly to Drive to Survive because it's
Yeah,
around.
absolutely.
Brand new fans and a brand new base. That much power in one company, you know, one
Yes.
that almost got
Yes.
killed off by Blockbuster.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you?
Okay.
Why are you a
Well,
fan for this long? From what,
okay.
82, 84?
Yeah. So I've been a fan of Formula One since 1983.
83.
When I was in middle school, like second or third day of middle school, just to give you a little context, the town that I grew up in, we had like 7 or 8 elementary schools, but they all fed into one intermediate or middle school for seventh and eighth grade. So you had all of these kids who were from all these different schools that all of a sudden were all coming together in one school. So there was a lot of kids and a lot of new faces on day one of middle school because there was a lot of kids that you had never seen before because you'd gone to different elementary schools. Anyway, so second or third day of middle school, I meet a guy who later on would become one of my best friends in the whole world. And he was a super passionate Formula One fan.
Hmm.
His grandmother was English. She had immigrated to the United States and in I forget what year, but she had immigrated to the United States. She married a US serviceman. She was a huge Formula One fan. And so she passed that down to her
Nice.
children, who
Yeah.
then passed it down to their children. So my
Yeah.
friend, I can't say his name and I'll explain why here in just a few minutes. He was a super, super passionate fan. And we got to talking about it and everything. And I had followed IndyCar for a number of years before then, but always just kind of on a casual basis. It was always kind of like watch the Indy 500 every year with my dad. Occasionally, when a race would come on TV and there was nothing else going on, we'd sit down and watch it. But it wasn't something that we were like, the race is on, we got to go watch it. My friend, who was super passionate about Formula One, he and I got to talking and everything. And because of his family's passion for Formula One, they actually had a satellite dish so that they could get BBC broadcasts.
Yeah.
And so he would record the races from the BBC broadcast. So he loans me a few of his videotapes. I get a chance to watch it. And I'm just immediately enthralled by it. I am just kind of like you. I'm just immediately enthralled by just how amazing these cars are.
Yeah.
As I became closer with my friend, as we became better and better friends and bonded over his love of Formula One, which he then passed on to me. So by the time we reached high school, he had decided at that point, his goal was he wanted to work in Formula One. And at that point, I had started racing karts and everything. He started helping engineer my kart. He very much wanted to work in Formula One. That became his singular focus. And so his only desire was to do that. which he later, after graduating from high school, graduating from university, was able to realize that dream. And he's now been working in Formula One for almost 30 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, so he has actually lived in England actually longer than he lived in the United States.
Wow.
So that's how I got into Formula One in the first place, and that's why I've been almost a lifelong fan, starting from the time that I was 11 or 12 years old to now. One of the things that I loved about Formula One, like you were talking about, your love of the speed and watching these guys being able to do just absolutely incredible feats. So one of the things that, in addition to the speed, that I really started to enjoy is my friends started teaching me about the technology that was involved in Formula One. And at that time, this was early days of where not a lot of people even had personal computers in their homes. And this was the days where personal computers were just really starting to become more and more prevalent. As he started to explain to me about some of the technology and everything that was already present in Formula One, I became more and more enamored with that aspect of Formula One, was the technology aspect. At the same time, as I started learning the technology aspect, I then started becoming really enthralled with the history of Formula One. Because just like my love of the history of the Indy 500, I've always been kind of a history buff anyway. Even before I became a Formula One fan, I always loved history, even as a young child. Learning about the history of Formula One, because you have to remember, when I started watching Formula One in 1983, and they'd already been racing for 33 years in Formula One, when I started checking out books out of the library about Formula One, and I started learning about the great drivers, like Fangio and Ascari and Nuvolaro and things like that, and started learning about the fact that Ferrari has been involved with Formula One since the very beginning. Colin Chapman, who was one of the greatest innovators in the history of the sport with Lotus, and then learning about other great drivers, their amazing stories, Jackie Stewart, James Hunt, Niki Lauda. And then you would hear about, okay, well, so-and-so who's now running this team. You would hear things like that during the broadcast. Well, Niki Lauda was actually still driving back then, but you would hear about some of these great personalities who had retired as drivers, but were now working for the teams, either as directors or engineers or things like that. Great innovations that have come and gone in Formula One. Like I said, you had the great innovators like Colin Chapman, and leaps forward in technology that were pioneered by guys like Ken Tyrrell and Colin Chapman. And it was just all of those things, my love of history and the rich history of Formula One up to that point already, plus the technology, plus the speed, plus the personalities. All these things come together, and it just ignited my passion. And it's been a passion that's just never gone away.
Yeah.
Now, I will admit that there was a time during probably early 2000s where I wasn't as interested. I still watched every race, don't get me wrong, but maybe I didn't read every little news bit that I could find about the sport. I wasn't reading the magazine. I wasn't going to the bookstores and stuff to find the F1 and racing magazines that they would get from Europe and everything that they would put on the newsstand. I maybe wasn't as passionate about it for probably maybe a 3 or 4 year span, but then that was only a short time span that I wasn't as passionate about it. It's just something that it is so much a part of me that I can't imagine a life without Formula One.
Dude, it's funny, I forgot who I was listening to about this, but somebody was saying that once you start watching and getting into F1, it infuses into your blood. You can't stop. It's not like you can quit F1 at that point. It's
No.
just inside. Whereas other sports that I've followed, I'll come in and out every once in a while, watch a hockey game here or there, or whatever. F1 is really one of those sports that religiously I'm watching every Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
I either have it taped or I'm watching it live or what have you. So it's a completely different sport versus anything else that I've experienced.
Oh, yeah. Not only that, but different in any other sport, because with your traditional stick and ball sports, so like hockey and football and things like that, sure, they have practice during the week, but nobody watches the practices.
Right. And most of the time, you're not allowed to.
Yeah, exactly. So most people, just the only thing they care about is the actual game. And you have the game that lasts 3-4 hours, and then that's it. They're done. Whereas with Formula One, every practice matters. qualifying matters, the race itself matters. And so all of it makes for very compelling entertainment. But if it's something that you want to watch all of it, you want to watch every time that car turns the wheel, even when you can, it may not be broadcast on actual terrestrial TV or anything like that, or over satellite. But I mean, it's like even the FIA or Formula One even a lot of times will actually broadcast on the internet preseason testing, things like that. Stuff that, I mean, even when I first started getting into Formula One, the only way you could find out about preseason testing is, like I said, you would have to go find the racing magazines that were produced in like Auto Week and Race Week and things like that were produced over in Europe. And then bookstores would import them and put them on the newsstand. And so you'd go buy them and take them home and read them and everything. And that was the only way to really learn about preseason testing, because this was even mid to late 90s, back when internet still really wasn't a thing that most people had access to and everything. That was the only way to get the information and everything. But it was still something that you were just, the passion ignites and you just want to know everything that you possibly can about the sport. You want to know about who's doing well, what team showed up at what test and how did they go, who was sandbagging and who was running the car lighter than what was legal in order to generate headline grabbing time. The way you said it a minute ago really reminded me of the line from Pretty Woman. Richard Gere is talking about opera. He says people, when they see their first opera, they love it or they hate it. If they hate it, they can grow to appreciate it, but it'll truly never be a part of their soul. And if they love it, they love it for the rest of their life. And that's kind of the way that I feel about Formula One, that when you first start enjoying Formula One, you either love it or hate it. And if you love it, you become passionate about it and it becomes just a very part of your soul. But if you don't like it later on, yes, you can still watch the races with a passing interest. If it's one of those things that if it's on, you'll sit down to watch it and everything, but it's not something that you're going to go out of your way to make sure that you watch every practice, every qualifying, every race. It's that part of your soul. Like right now in the off season and everything, and it's almost like you have a countdown. It's like 89 days till
yeah, exactly.
81 days till the season opens, 80, like that.
Yeah.
So that's why I love F1. That's my history and of how I came to love F1 and what still drives my passion for it.
Right on.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and wrap it up. So I hope you enjoyed indulging Corey and I today in kind of talking about why we love F1, why we're doing this podcast is because of our passion for F1. That we just kind of want to continue to share that passion with others. And for the newer fans, or maybe even the seasoned fans who was always more into the racing aspect of it, but didn't know the history or was not as knowledgeable about the technology, that we're bringing you some of that insight. And we're hoping that you're really enjoying listening to these two guys who are super passionate about the sport, all aspects of the sport, us sharing what our passion for it and our knowledge and our ability to break down the technological parts of it and everything. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to continue doing episodes kind of like this for the next few weeks until the season starts back up. We're just going to be talking about other parts of the sport that maybe don't necessarily fit into our weekly and bi-weekly discussions during the season. And we hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that you'll continue to stick around and enjoy it some more.
Spread it to your friends.
Yes, exactly. Tell your friends about it. It really does help us out. It helps get out the word and everything. So anyway, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today, and we'll come back to you again next week. We're going to have more news and rumors, and we'll also have another interesting subject to talk about. So until then, for Corey Brune, I'm Scott Vick. So long.
Thank you for listening to F1 Great Chat. If you have enjoyed what you heard, don't miss a single episode by hitting that subscribe button in your favorite podcatcher. Also, help us grow by sharing us with your friends and fellow F1 fans. We value your feedback and passion, so please take a moment to review our podcast. Your reviews help us grow and improve, and it means the world to us. Share your thoughts, rate us, and let us know how we can make the show experience even better. F1 Break Check is a production of Break Check Media. For your hosts Scott Vick and Corey Brune, until next time, stay inside track limits and try not to pitch it in the kitty litter.